come on guys, come on in. Hi, I'm James, a photographer and online media personality in Atlanta, Georgia. I live and work in my Castleberry Hill studio, and in my spare time I love to cook. But being that I'm one of nearly 25 million Americans who lives in a food desert, it can be a challenge to find healthy and fresh ingredients in my neighborhood. This show is my way of sharing some of my favorite home cooking tips to eating restaurant quality meals on a tight budget through recipes I've learned in my travels and also my West African and Southern American roots. This is The Counter. Good afternoon, my name is James K. Holder II. Some of you may know me as Sir James II. I'd like to welcome you back to The Counter. This is part 2 of our season 2 two-part premiere, where we are doing a 6-course dinner all plated for $10 per person. In this segment of our dinner, we're actually going to do 3 dishes. The first of which is going to be our appetizer course, a spinach risotto dish that I'm going to call Czech risotto. It's inspired by my time growing up in Liberia. Next, we're going to go to a traditional North American style steak dinner, which is going to feature our New York strip. And then we're also going to finish it off with a cocktail-inspired blueberry Caipirinha instant sorbet. So we've got our water coming up to boil, we've got our spinach, we've also got some of our okra. I'm going to drop in about half of this spinach, we don't need all of this. We're also going to put in our okra. We'll let that cook. The next thing I want to use is an ingredient that we're going to prepare for our steak dinner. And I want to prepare some caramelized onions for that. We're going to take a sweet Vidalia onion. Caramelized onions is something that you can just use to increase a flavor profile of a steak. I actually found some really good steaks today, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when we go to browning it. But all we're going to do is take this onion, which already is going to have a lot of natural sweetness. We're going to cut it into fine rings. We'll start a little bit of extra virgin olive oil right in here. And we don't even need to start in a hot pan. I'm just going to start it as is. You're going to place these right in here, monitor these. Stir them around. In about 30 minutes, those will be done. A few minutes remaining on our spinach. This looks pretty good. Gonna let that go another minute. The only thing I want to do now is start on a preparation for our final component, which is our dessert. And I need to make a simple syrup. Everyone who's ever made a simple syrup before knows it's as simple as it sounds. All you want is equal parts sugar and equal parts water. A cup of sugar, a cup of filtered water. I'm gonna let that come up to a boil. I'm going to remove our spinach and our okra from our pot here. I'll squeeze a little bit of this water out. We don't want so much water in here. Growing up in Liberia, we used to have this item all the time, and this is our fresh sugar cane. The dish that our dessert is inspired by is called a Caipirinha. It is made with a sugar cane based rum. My friend Josh does not drink alcohol, and so instead of having a sugar cane based rum, we're just going to basically use sugar cane as the inspiration for our dessert. And I'm going to incorporate the sugarcane flavor into our simple syrup. I'm just going to cut pieces of this and leave some pieces for our garnish and add it right into our simple syrup. So you see our caramelized onions are coming along. Reduce that heat just a little bit. Don't want it to burn. We've got our flavor in our simple syrup, and I don't want this to keep reducing, but I do want to chill this down because it's going into our cold dish for later. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this off the heat, place it in the refrigerator. And I'm going to start preparing our ingredients for our Czech risotto. This is an interpretation of an African party rice side, and I am going to start spinach and okra and place it right into our blender. And this is going to give us a bit of a paste that we're going to use to add to our dish. I asked the guys earlier to each name an ingredient that we could include in our dish that would be from their choice. Josh's selection was spinach, Smalls' selection was rice, okra is one of my favorites, and we're doing it all combined into a risotto preparation, and it's going to be not so classic, it's going to be a little bit different. Now risotto has some very classic components, so the first thing I want to do is bring our stock up to temperature. Every risotto has a few basic ingredients. Stock is one of the most important, and I'm going to start with 2 quarts. I just want to start getting this up to temperature. Next, like I said, we want to use probably about half of this stick of unsalted butter. So this is 2 cups, and that's how much arborio rice I'm going to start with for our risotto. It doesn't need to be rinsed. I'm going to go ahead and take my caramelized onions off the heat. Now that our stock has come up to a simmer, it's ready for us to incorporate into our risotto. I'm going to turn this front burner down quite a bit while we go over what's featured in our next dish. Now, as you know, our last meal featured a bit of a wine. Clink, clink. And this is our Sauvignon Blanc. It is a white Bordeaux. You can use any dry white wine that you like for this application. We've got our chicken stock, pecorino romano cheese, our unsalted butter, arborio rice, onion, and garlic minced. Let me grab our pot. We're just gonna get started on our risotto. We've got all of our ingredients in place. And so the first thing we wanna start in our pan is our butter. This is, I guess, about 8 tablespoons of butter. I'm gonna start with just like a healthy 3 with our wooden spoon. I'm gonna go ahead and toss our onion in. Once our onions become a bit translucent, I'm going to toss in some of our garlic here. I'm not going too heavy on the garlic. I want it to be not overbearing, and I certainly don't want our garlic to burn. This is looking a little bit dry because we added all those things in. So I'm going to add a little bit more butter before tossing in our rice. So we're adding in another tablespoon. Now, ordinarily, you might be worried about the salt content at this point, but as I said, we're using unsalted butter just to make sure that we're not overdoing it. We're using a store-bought chicken stock, which is like something I don't generally do. Sometimes if you're doing chicken stock, it's good to make your own if you were going to be using chicken anyway. There's no chicken present in this dish. Right. So I would have had to go buy chicken backs or chicken necks or whatever, and that didn't really fit into the rules. So, you know, the rule is make your own, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to turn the heat up, and I'm going to add to our pan of butter, onion, and garlic our arborio rice. And this is 2 cups of arborio rice. Now, what I want to do is make sure that all of this gets coated very thoroughly with our butter. But this could be a go-to dish. I mean, if you're talking about something that's versatile, something that's affordable, arborio rice is, you know, comparable to jasmine rice or basmati rice. Any other, it's not, you know, exorbitant. Right. And then you're just using some pretty straightforward ingredients: butter, onion, garlic, things that you already have. Maybe with a little bit of fancy cheese thrown in there. And then you can throw your own spin on it. If you wanted to put some mushrooms, if you want to put some fresh peas.
Like those oyster mushrooms from earlier.
Like the oyster mushroom from earlier. We're going to let this go for maybe about 3 or 4 minutes. Don't walk away from this because you don't want it to get browned. What you really want to do is just sort of get it to where it smells a little toasty. You know, when people talk about like a nutty smell, you kind of want to get a little hint of that, and then you know you're ready to proceed to your next step. And remember, this is right now over medium heat. When I started the butter melting, I was actually using it on like 3 or 2 or something like that, not so high. This is about 3 ounces. So if you're measuring it out, you want to use about the same amount of white wine as you use butter.
So generally when you're cooking with wine, what does wine actually do to the preparation? Like what is it, how does it help or hurt?
I would say it tends to round out all the flavors. So if you're looking for like flavor complexity, there's like certain ingredients that you can use that are always going to do that. Anything that's fermented is going to add a layer of complexity. The kimchi, the rice wine vinegar that we used earlier, soy sauce is a fermented product. It adds a layer of flavor that you can't really replicate. And so using it in cooking adds a whole series of flavors and notes and body to any dish that you're going to make. And then with this, because we're not using a lot and we're going to use it in this particular way where it's just going to cook right off, you're not going to get that wine taste.
Got it.
You know what I mean? All the alcohol is basically going to be cooked out of this. So we are ready to move on. Now that our rice is good and hot, we're just going to pour this wine right in. And we're just going to let this simmer until it stops steaming. Once all the wine evaporates out and kind of gets into the rice, Then we're going to move forward with our chicken stock, and that will start the process of cooking our risotto. And from end to end, this dish should take about 20 minutes. And I'm just going to start ladling our chicken stock right on in to our pan. One thing that's very important, that was about a ladle and a half. One thing that's very important is that you want to allow the stock to cook in as you go along, and it will have the starch forming around the kernels and create that sort of creamy texture that you look for in a risotto dish. It's very important that you don't let your stock over-reduce because it'll keep getting saltier and saltier and saltier.
Okay.
And it's also reducing in here. So you definitely want to keep an eye on that. But you don't want to be adding lukewarm or cold stock into your hot rice because then what will happen is it'll stop the cooking process on your rice. So it's sort of one of those things where there's a lot of moving parts, but you want to sort of keep everything going. As we part it, you can see that sort of that starchy liquid is forming around, and watch, you'll see when I add this ladle in, it'll kind of you'll watch it thicken up as you're incorporating. You part it and it kind of goes back in. At some point, maybe about 10 minutes from now, what we'll do is we'll start tasting the rice for doneness. Once it gets to the point that it's basically done, we'll incorporate our last set of ingredients. This is not something you really want to take your eye off of. You see how quickly it starts, now it's parting. Once it gets to the point where that part holds, kind of like the Red Sea, you want to then add your next ladle. It's a real reference though, because if you're wondering when is it time to add more stock?
Right. When it starts parting.
When the part holds.
Right.
This will stick to the bottom of your pan if you let it, and you don't want that to happen.
Yeah, risotto, it doesn't look like it's a set and forget kind of dish.
Absolutely not.
You're like, is it a difficult dish to make? You're like, no, it's not difficult. That's a difficult dish to make.
I think what trips people up about things like risotto is that there's no exact recipe, there's no exact amount of stock that you're going to use. You kind of just listen to the ingredients, and once it's ready for the next ladle, which is now, you just add a little bit more in. So I'm going to add one more in, then I'm going to start grating my cheese. I'm going to try to multitask a little bit. This is not very easy, but I'm watching.
Oh, you're good.
So I'm going to do, I'm just pointing out that I'm grating some cheese, putting down my spatula momentarily. You see it's ready for a little more liquid. And I can look at this and tell that it's not done. I know for a fact that this rice is just not cooked through. I'm going to keep this rolling, keep stirring, keep scraping it off the bottom. Because as that starch builds, starch likes to burn.
Yeah, my takeaway from risotto is it seems like a great at-home dish, like if I'm trying to impress the wife, but it's like something that I need to do. Hey, Jacqueline. But it's something I need to do before she's even home, probably, because then I can't concentrate.
No, see, I disagree.
The only reason I say this thing will seize up on you, you really have to make it to order.
And that's the problem with something like this. And I think when you were saying difficult, I keep going back to difficult because that's where it would be difficult for me. Like, you've got to watch it. You've got to stay on top of it. I will burn everything in that pot.
Really, this just means that we need to practice our cooking game.
Ooh.
Because I think this is literally a sexy dish.
It is a sexy dish, but I think a lot of that comes in.
Did you just salsa?
I did.
He did. He did.
Continue.
No, I think a lot of that comes into preparation, like actually cooking it. That's why, for me, it wouldn't make much sense to cook it before.
I think you cook it for somebody you liked a lot.
Yeah, but I wouldn't cook it before they come home. Like, this is how you cook something like that.
Now I'm sort of testing for doneness. I know it's not going to be done.
That's true. Yeah,
we probably got about another 3 or 4 ladles on this. I said about doing this 6-course dinner, and I said I want to do it for $10 per person, and you were just like, why not $20 a person?
Yeah.
But that defeats the purpose. I mean, what would you say we average when we go out for our dinner excursions per person?
Per person.
It's not $10 a person.
Let's say $40 a person.
No way is that low. I mean, one time when we went to. No.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, there's no way. Come on, be real with me, because when we went to 6, 7, 8, it was about $200 for the three of us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
The time we went to Bones, it was about $350 for the three of us,
true.
if not
That's
more.
true.
I mean, it's like if you're gonna do the multiple courses and the full out thing, it can easily be over $100 per person. And so being able to not necessarily do it at home all the time, but just knowing if you want to do something nice, sometimes you might not have all that budget, but you can definitely throw together some nice dishes. If you're doing this for your family member or someone special, take 2 or 3 of the courses from tonight and then just, you know, replicate them.
Right.
Spend about $8 a person. It's not a lot.
Yeah, that's right.
This is the new spoon that I'm testing the doneness on it. Almost one more ladle. And also I like that, yeah, wow. Oop, I'm actually really happy with this. We got about one more ladle to go on this.
Hey, so every episode of The Counter I've watched of James, you go back and check youtube.com. The Counter TV. So the funny part of James is...
Our website is www.thecountertv.com. Okay? Just don't be sending them to the wrong place. What was your point?
The whole reason
Spit it
I
out.
said that is, and y'all could track me on this, at one point if James is making something, he always says, huh, this is actually really good.
I promise you, when we press record every day, I'm like, I don't know how to f***ing cook. Like, I've forgotten everything.
The first time I was like, you know, maybe it's just a rhythm thing, like, you know, it's a camera and there's a lot going on. Then after, I'm like, I wonder if James, when he's cooking for himself, is like, huh, pleasant surprise.
I mean, I won't say that, but like, I'd be thinking it sometimes. Like, I mean, no, seriously, kid you not. When I tasted that pickled watermelon rind a minute ago, I was like, oh, okay. Like, it was not, I knew it would taste good. I didn't expect it to taste that good.
Right.
The mushroom, I didn't expect it to taste that good. I just didn't. So it's just kind of, sometimes food surprises you. And it's always the stuff that you just get at the store. You know what I mean? It's like, this is not anything fancy. And this looks pretty good. You see how all the rice is a little bit more uniform. There's some white in there. Like I can see this one piece looks a little undone. But for the most part, it looks pretty balanced on this side. So I'm going to taste it for doneness here, new spoon. And that is actually ready. I want to fold in our special ingredient. Now this is our Czech risotto. So I'm going to add in our pureed spinach with a little bit of okra in there. Earlier, we blended this up in the blender. It is a very interesting look. This is what you asked for. You wanted greens.
Who? Me?
Yes. When I said, what do you want in... Anyway, look.
Not exactly what I had in mind.
Okay. So we're going to spoon this in. 1, 2, and we're going to add a little bit more. I'm going for a bright green color here. Now, if you saw Czech rice at a Liberian function, it would look very much just like this very vibrant green tone. The only thing I'm going to do to add to this is our sprinkled on cheese. This is about 1 ounce of the shredded amount, and then I'm going to reserve that for the top when I serve it to you. Okay, I'm going to scoop this. Finely grated fresh Pecorino Romano cheese. Dig in. Wow, that's creamy. And hot.
At the end of it, like, I understand how much work went into it more. Like, it was always a restaurant dish for me, but now I understand the amount of work that goes into making a plate of risotto or a bowl of risotto. And it's good for that. Like, it's creamy. Like you said, the cheese kind of rounds it out.
The cheese is amazing.
But I do think, like, the texture of the rice, like, consistency of the actual risotto, this is really good risotto.
Now we are getting to the point where we are making our final dinner course, and that is our steak. We're doing a cast iron steak preparation, and this is from the region of North America.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right here at home, baby. Okay, so I'm very big on using the best available ingredients at your price point. Like, what are the grades of steaks?
There's like select, there's choice, there's prime.
So if you're talking about prime, one thing that would make a steak prime would be sort of the features of like marbling, the way that it was raised. You also have different tiers like dry aged, grass fed. This steak is none of those things. This is a choice, and as opposed to prime, all of these are cut from the same section. This part comes in a little bit, and it comes in a little bit less. Now there's almost none. This is at the end of what would have been in that segment of sort of a non-prime cut because of this. Yep. So we got lucky. This is basically showing some similarities with a prime cut of New York strip. And New York strip I like for individual servings like this because it's not so much meat. Each one of these fillets is about 12 ounces. And I like to have some fat on there. I'm going to trim just a little bit off where I see it lingering. It's just there's nice marbling throughout the cut. And what that's going to mean is that as this is cut through and cooking, then we're going to have some nice moisture building into our steak. When your steak is cooked, you want the temperature on the inside to be according to whatever your preference is. One way to do that is to start with a room temperature steak. And our pan is smoking. You can see it. Toss in a little bit of oil. As you see this side that has the fat on it, I'm going to sear that side first because I like to brown all the sides. If I'm going for medium, I will generally time this whole cook to about 10 to 11 minutes. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to go ahead and flip this one on its first side. You don't want to crowd the pan. And you see how it's already starting to cook just because of the residual heat, yeah. But you can see what that texture can look like on the inside. I think the number one thing you want to do with any steak is start with a room temperature cut of meat. So we're going to flip this. There's 6 minutes left. And what I want to do, I'm going to let this go for a minute. Then I'm going to slide it under the broiler for about 2 to 3 minutes while we cut some of our other ingredients. And then start with our basting. We've got our smashed garlic cloves, salted butter. Yeah. We have got rosemary and thyme. And we have got our caramelized onions, which will be left to the end. We're going to reduce the heat on this burner. I'm going to pull this out of the oven before it overcooks. And I'm going to start basting with our butter and our herbs. I'm going to skirt these over to the side, let that butter get in there. So this garlic all up in there. This is just going to be luscious. Coat and baste with our butter. I'm going to toss in our rosemary and our fresh thyme. Let that get all coated in there. Anytime you cook your meat, you want to allow it a bit of time to rest for all of your pieces to come back together. So in this time, while our steak is resting, I'm going to prepare our instant sorbet. The first thing I want to do is get our berries out of our freezer and get them into the blender. And we have here our sugarcane simple syrup. Have you ever had sugarcane before, Josh? I know
probably.
you have.
Not likely. I don't think so.
Not likely. Okay. Well,
a variation of sugarcane.
Immediately.
Candy canes?
Immediately.
Is that not the same thing?
But like, stop the show. We're going down play.
that will I'm boring.
Wait, where's that from? Hold on.
Okay, so we have our first batch. So just so you see it, this is like the texture that we get when you blend the frozen berries. So this is already in sort of a sorbet state. I'm just let it harden up just a little bit more in the freezer while we enjoy our steak for maybe like 10 minutes, and then it'll be good to go. So I've got my chef's knife. And now we are going to cut into our perfectly cooked steak.
Oh.
So we were going for medium, and that was where we landed. A little pink on the inside. The other good thing about slicing your steak in this fashion is that if I did, let's say if I had 3 steaks and I had more than 3 guests, I could kind of present it in a way that each person is getting a part of a steak. So, and it doesn't, you can't necessarily tell that you didn't have an entire steak to yourself. I could kind of just drizzle over, dress the steak with a bit of our caramelized onions that we made earlier. So I think for me, again, when you're using sort of a not so fancy cut, you can definitely dress it up a bit. Let me grab my salt, And y'all let me know what you think. Is that what they say is good when it's just silence? when you bite into it?
Yeah, you're onto something here.
It's good, man. I like how it got flavor.
$3.99 a pound.
Really?
Packed same day.
Really?
$3.99. This is from the farmer's market. And this is where a lot of the restaurateurs go to get their nice cuts of beef. And again, they just have a nice little overlap of what's there. If I wanted a ribeye, it would have been $4.99 a pound. Again, the ribeyes probably would have been a nice piece of fat running through it. But again, if you have that fat running through, it can cut the cost of your steak in half. But if you're slicing it anyway, you just slice it, take that fat part out. Your guests never knew that it was there. And we're going to take our pre-made whipped cream that we have in our refrigerator. We're going to fold in our lime zest, a bit of our lime juice. Use our little cocktail glasses. So we've got our lime wedge, got our little sugarcane piece, and we're going to just sort of dollop on some whipped cream. Nothing fancy with this, just so this is our instant blueberry Caipirinha Sorbet.
James, this is so pretty.
It is pretty.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining me. So let's raise our glass.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
To season 2.
Season two.
I could have incorporated a little bit of rum into the blend itself, but the whole point was to do a non-alcoholic take on a cocktail to celebrate the summer for the region of South America, which is Brazil. So that is the end of our world tour.
Nice.
So gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining me at the counter for our, what are we calling this episode? Our Guys Night In, basically.
Guys Night In.
Is where it started at. And of course, you're welcome back anytime. As always, you're also welcome back at the counter anytime. I'd like you to join us.
6 degrees.
Don't do this. 6 degrees.
Yeah, because it's like degrees on a map, like coordinates, but it's like 6 courses.
Dude, he's like halfway through the closer.
Oh, sorry.
Closer.
This will be.
There's no alcohol in this sorbet.
Halfway
Just
through
throwing
the
it out
closer.
there.
I'm like,
As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, I'd like to thank you all for joining me at the counter. You're welcome back anytime. And of course, you out there on YouTube are welcome to join me at the counter at any time. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I want you to retweet this and repeat this. Tune in to future episodes of The Counter Tuesdays at www.thecountertv.com, and make sure to subscribe where you can find past episodes of The Counter, as well as demos on how to do things like make whipped cream and sharpen your own knives. As always, I'd like to ask you to relax, relate, and resist.
Cheers.
cheers.
Not bad for an instant sorbet, huh?
What makes instant sorbet instant?
You didn't see him making it in the corner.
Pay attention, John. I'm like, where are you? I'm like, is it, what makes it instant?
So, I guess the problem is I've never had sorbet.
Thank you for joining me here at the counter. I'd love for you to become a sponsor of our show. Donations of $1 or more are used to help productions for this show, as well as all the other programming on holderstudio.com. And Members who donate at least $100 will be featured as producer-level sponsors in the credits of this series. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.